Hello, family. My name is James Trice, and I'm the creator of a podcast called YANA, or You Are Not Alone. You Are Not Alone is a podcast for Black men. It is more than just a podcast. It's a lifeline and a brotherhood. We're here to create a supportive, judgment-free space where Black men can have real, open conversations about what truly matters to us, from family and relationships to community, sports, culture, politics, faith, sex, race, education, and the challenges of everyday life. We dive deep into it all. Whether you're looking for advice, motivation, prayer, or just a comfort of knowing you're not walking this journey alone. YANA is here for you. This is your space to connect, grow, and be heard, because none of us are meant to do life alone. Look for new episodes weekly wherever you get your podcasts. And look for me on Instagram at jbtrice123. Welcome to YANA. Grace and peace, everyone. This is James Trice. Welcome to this new edition of YANA, You Are Not Alone. It's a space for Black men, for we as Black men to talk, to listen, to be heard, to express ourselves, to really talk about what matters most to us. Today's guest, we have none other than Trey Joiner. I met this brother about 2 years ago, maybe longer, probably 3 years ago, working on a project to revitalize 38th in Chicago, the place where George Floyd was lynched by Minneapolis police. And we met and worked on that project together to create a plan for how the city should revitalize that area. And we met on that work, and him and I have been talking ever since. Thank you, Trey, for joining us, and introduce yourself and tell the audience what you want to know about them, what you want them to know about you.
No doubt,
Sorry
no
about
doubt.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, James, I just want to say, I appreciate you having this space for Black men. I think it's an important thing to have. And if we don't, carve out these spaces, no one's going to carve it out for us. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on here, and did some looking on previous people you've had on here, and I've enjoyed, the ones I've seen. So, kudos to you, man. So yeah, a little bit about me. I'm from Georgia, West Georgia. Got some family in Alabama. I kind of grew up in West and East Georgia. All my family's from there. Kind of like all into biking. I don't like driving a car. I don't have a car. My partner does, but I don't have a car. So I bike pretty much everywhere, take transit. I'm about that kind of like healthy lifestyle. And yeah, I'm in urban planning. I like to kind of think about how people move around spaces, how people collaborate, how people come to decisions for community benefit. And I guess the last thing, I'm a huge, massive nerd, so that may come out here.
Okay, it's okay. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. So you talk about biking. Talk a little bit about that, man, because we live in Minnesota. I call it Minnesota because it's cold. It's cold like 9 months out of the year. It was what it seems like. And as
Yeah.
a Black man from Georgia, warm
Yep.
weather in this climate where it can get 20, 30, 40 below zero, riding your bike,
Yep.
how do you do that in the wintertime?
I think I mean I've been biking since college, but I think I'm privileged from by having ignorance and determination. I'm like, I don't care how cold it is, and I know I want a bike, and that combination just gets me to go out and do it. Now, if I was a smart guy, I'd probably ride my car. I'd probably like ride my partner's car, or like, or buy
Right.
a car myself. But I find comfort in my determination to like want to get out there and work my body, be out there, be in space, be myself in space, and just do
That's
what I
beautiful,
what I
man.
need to do. Yeah.
You're rare, man. I don't know very many Black folk who ride a bike in this kind of weather. I don't know, but
I,
maybe there's more than what I think it is. Maybe there's more out there. You know better than I would.
I
That's
think
incredible.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
man, I freeze from going from my door to my car, my driveway, and I'm frozen by the time I get there
I
sometime.
feel you. I feel
And
you.
you're
No, I
right.
feel the
And
cold. I feel the cold. It's just, I'm like, whatever, let's do it.
so how do you dress up? What do you do? What do you wear?
Yeah, man, I think like most things in life, when you know you're gonna do something difficult, you gotta prepare for it. And
Okay.
I put on like cold resistant pants, I put on like water resistant shirt, I layer up, and I'm prepared for whatever the world may bring to me. In this circumstance, it's the weather, or it's ice patches, or it's some idiot biking stupidly in front of me or something like that. And so I think that's just, the way you go about it. Just bring what you got, what you need to take you through it.
Brother, you know, I commend you, because that's something that I wouldn't do, but you look like you enjoy it, and that's good. I'm glad for you, man. So,
Yeah.
we're not a monolith, not just in our thinking, but in the things that we do,
Yep.
right? Meaning that you enjoy things, and I'm like, wow, I would never think that a black man be on a bike at 20 below zero riding a bike. I wouldn't even think that. But hey,
Hey man, we might get you
seem
out
to
there one
enjoy
day. I
it.
don't know. We might
Well,
get you out there.
let's see. I would. Let's see.
We'll
You might have to
see.
put a little. You may have to put a little bit of money in my pocket, man, for me to be able to do
Got it. No,
that. Anyway, man, let me ask this. So you talk about you in planning, and you talking about how you plan for spaces and things like that. Talk a little bit about um, how the history of black folks being removed from our spaces, right? Being uprooted from the spaces that we have occupied, that represent us. Where, in your work, where have you seen that, and how have you tried to try to stop that, try to alleviate that, or try to minimize it, or even oppose it in your work?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. And not to rehash all the history around urban planning and the decisions made by the people in power to deprive people of color from their own self-determination. But we know that has happened and it continues to happen in society. And I think where my role kind of is, and I'm pretty midway through my career, and I started out planning, doing like street designs and like planning out bikeways and streets and parking lanes and how people move around areas. But I found what is missing from that kind of design focus approach is the stories that influence and fuel and give context to those decisions. And there weren't a lot of people who were well equipped to have those conversations with people who like me or people or other minorities. And so I've kind of geared my approach to planning by trying to pull in voices so that decisions don't necessarily only reflect, white folks or the majority, but they also reflect, how, people's lives who are adversely impacted, people of color, Black folks, can be, enhanced or increased or even incorporated. And I think there's not a science to it, and it's different for every community you reach out to. But it's a continual struggle, and I think it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I want to kind of do my best every day to kind of incorporate those people into the planning process.
So how do you do that exactly? How do you incorporate let's say that there's a piece of land, right,
Yeah,
that black folks want to that are occupying.
yeah,
But the city or the powers that may be, the planners, city planners, whatever, state planners want to come in and put a road there. Um,
yeah.
how do you prevent that from happening? What do you do exactly to make sure that that kind of stuff doesn't continue to happen?
Yeah, and I think where I try to interject myself and my philosophy around planning and engagement is not I don't have the power to make decisions, but I do have the power to craft the environment in which decisions are made
Hmm.
by deciding who you talk to, where you talk to them, what types of information you solicit from them, how they provide input throughout the development life cycle of a project. Having the power or the ability to determine those entry points into the planning process, I think is really important because it lets you craft the narrative. And where I really find my passion is around crafting narratives that are intrinsically reflective of the struggles and perils and hopes and visions of people of color and people who look like me. Because if you're able to capture that and you're able to mm, provide the context around a project, so say it's a row project going through a Black community as you illustrated, you can uplift the voices in that environment to where the decision makers, the people who actually have the power, have to confront those realities before they make any decision. And I think in the past, what's really, led to adverse impacts is that there has been really shitty engagement processes where they just don't consult people of color. They don't do different engagement tools to get to help people of color really understand the impacts of the project, and they don't really publicize what they heard from the public. And that allows people to make decisions in vacuums, which I despise and I try to combat.
Wow. What has been the challenge then internally? Because it sounds like you play an internal role, so you're within the spaces where the decision makers are, the people who are planning
Yeah.
are. Um,
Yeah.
where have you seen where have you seen them pay attention to what you say? Um, where have you seen them gather information correctly and then respond
hmm
correctly, given that community what it wants, even if that community says, we don't want that here?
hmm Yeah, I think this thing is a double-edged sword. That thing is laziness. Because sometimes people are too lazy and they just want to do the same thing every single time because they know it works. They want you to have one open house. They want you to maybe do a project email, and they know it works and they're going to do the project. But then
Well, it
sometimes
doesn't, but
people,
it doesn't
but
work
it doesn't,
because
but it doesn't, but it
it
doesn't.
doesn't work. Right.
Exactly. But then sometimes people trust you so much and they don't want to involve themselves in the nuances of the project, and they allow you to really guide and shape the process. And you're able to create a very elaborate plan. And like one of the example that kind of comes to mind is I recently worked on a project in South Minneapolis, where it's a primarily Hispanic community. Um, it's close to yeah, if you're familiar with Minneapolis, gosh, I forget what it's called right now. It's the Sabathian Community Center.
Hmm.
So there's institutional focal points for communities of color along the corridor. There's different demographics there, as I mentioned, and I was able to like have uh, reoccurring project meetings at Spathany Community Center and an elders group that wanted to talk about the project, and we held that throughout the entirety of the project. I was also able to host a in Spanish week-long design workshop where kids who spoke Spanish, primarily spoke Spanish, were able to design the street, and they're like in like third grade, something I had assumed they weren't really exposed to. But I was able to do that because there was a lot of trust in my approach to engagement. Um, and I was able to like, really incorporate those voices into that process, which then led to a project that was, at least I would say supported by the community around Sabathany, definitely supported by some of the Hispanic community because of the entryway we had at Richard Green Central School. And I think from the larger community, people who, say business owners or people who, I'll say like, white folks, for example, like they kind of saw the results of that engagement process. And I heard and saw during our open houses that they found it more difficult to communicate their personal beliefs and fight for themselves, which and fight for their personal impact, which I think sometimes would kind of run conflict to that community impact, the impact that we had kind of crafted around, or the type of engagement we had crafted around the project, if that makes sense.
So are you saying, and correct, here's what I'm thinking, I hear you say that what happens is white folks who are generally always engaged, always involved, when you began to incorporate the people of color, particularly you said the Hispanic community, in the
Mhm.
process for a particular area, that white folks felt that they couldn't get their voices heard, or they felt that
They
their
felt,
voice.
yeah. Thanks for that, James. I think they felt less empowered to be selfish and or be less
Mm,
community minded. Um, be, so I think if you just do the same old thing, you're gonna get the same old people show up, and then
yeah, yeah.
those spaces they feel very actualized in fighting for their personal reasons, you know?
Well, the centering of whiteness, right? That we've
Yeah.
been conditioned in this society is to center whiteness and the white way of doing things. So when they felt that way, what were their response?
Yeah, so when we held all of our open houses, I was always at the front saying, "Hey, we did all this type of engagement. We worked with Richard Green Central. We had these meetings at Sabathani. We did these pop-ups in at particular
Hmm.
events along the corridor, and that's how we got to building the input for the project." And so the first thing they got when they were introduced to the project was a wealth of narrative we had crafted around what the community is and what we heard from them. So then they would go through the rest of open house, hear more details about the engagement, and then they see the designs reflected from that input. And when you craft such a mounting level of rationale for people, it makes it very difficult for them to say, well, that's wrong, but, or like, that doesn't match my perspective. It's hard to do that when you have pictures, you have diagrams, you have charts, you have numbers of this robust engagement process. And so I found people kind of just being like, well, kind of like I don't really know how to describe it, like the
I mean,
body language I saw.
right? Did they acquiesce
Yeah, yeah.
peaceably,
Grum
peacefully?
they kind of grumbled a little bit
Of course.
and like it was like and then walked away. Because I think they found an
Mm.
environment in which their whiteness didn't win them the ticket.
Mm.
They found an
Like
environment.
it always has, right?
Yeah,
Like it
yeah.
always has. Yeah.
Which yeah, like it usually does. Yeah.
So let me ask this then. How concerned are you with our future as Black people repeating the same historical traumas of spatial removal, right?
As
Um,
us being the perpetrators,
Spatial inequity. Huh?
as
I'm
us
sorry.
being the perpetrators,
No,
as like,
of us
oh,
still being the victims
oh,
of the same old abuses like the Rondo community here and so many other
yeah,
communities we can talk about Central Park and other areas where Black folks have been uprooted from their spaces. Again, Tulsa. I mean, but that was done violently to take the space
yeah,
from Black folks. How concerned are you with that kind of thing repeating itself? And then what are you prepared to do to prevent that from happening?
yeah. I mean, very concerned. And I think I'm very concerned for different reasons. I mean, moving to Minnesota, the vibe is different here. Racism looks different here. Power looks different here than it was at Georgia. And Georgia is very in your face, and like you could be an idiot and know, you know, where the perceived power dynamic, what race, who's racist and who's not. Here, it's in the Midwest and in Minneapolis in particular, it's very sophisticated. And it's so sophisticated that a person that looks like me can commit it on their own people because it's the structures. I think it's represented in the structures of, city government or county government. What decisions are reinforced? Who is put in power without support to make decisions, and through inexperience or laziness or whatever, they're making a harmful, impactful decision. I think I'm very concerned with the level of sophistication and normality of racism here and how that shows up. and how it makes people who try to fight against it seem like dissidents or like, oh, that person's a little crazy. Like, we're not crazy. It's like there's a serious issue here. We're trying to combat it in ways, but it's just so ingrained in society here, that it requires a more intentional, thought out approach to address it, I think.
Mhm. What do you do in the work? Because you said it's ingrained, and we understand that. And I thought I heard you say that there were individuals like yourself who can still perpetuate the same old kinds of behavior because it's so, I think, baked in the cake here
Yep, yep,
in Minnesota, right? That we
yep.
don't see it like fish don't see water, right? That
100%.
we don't see it, and we continue to perpetuate that. How do you um how do you make sure that doesn't happen? And how do you blow the whistle to communities to alert them that here's the possibilities, and I need you to wake up and pay attention to what's getting ready to happen?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, well, I think for me is when you separate yourself from community or your community, it's easier to make decisions. It's more likely to make decisions that may impact them negatively. And so how do I kind of go about that? I think for me, it's making sure that you the way I go about my life is influenced and kind of cultured by my culture, because you don't want to get so far off the beaten path. They're like, okay, I got a job as a city planner now, and now I'm the only black person in my job, and I'm doing a good job, and okay, I got promoted. But at a certain point, you find yourself around no black folks, and you're making decisions for black folks, and you're the only one. But like, who's helping you make those decisions? Like, who's helping you ground your decisions in reality?
Mm-hmm.
Some people can go and trailblaze like that. I know for myself, I need,
Mm-hmm.
I need people like-minded people there to help me along the way to ground my decisions in reality, because this work is really difficult. There is a lot of opportunity for making mistakes that may impact someone.
Wow, man, you're in a strategic place to really affect and prevent atrocities from happening, to prevent a repeat of Rondo in other communities, man. I'm gonna shift gears here. I'm gonna go somewhere else, and I want to hear from you. How does it feel to be a black man in that space? Because you kind of alluded to it a second ago.
Yeah.
Sometime you're the only black person in that space.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be a black man, conscious black man, as I feel that you are, in those spaces? What does it mean for you?
Yeah, I think I I think everything is heightened. That's probably the best way to look at it. It's
Mm,
like your successes can be more successful, or your failures can be more of a failure, because there's a lot of uh, perceived or actual pressure on you to perform in an environment that you shouldn't have to perform to that degree, to people's expectations, right? So like
mm,
take an example, like I'm in a meeting and we're talking about some, let's say North Minneapolis, some community in North Minneapolis is about some let's say it's about Blue Line. I'm not on a Blue Line project, but let's say it's about Blue Line. And I'm in this meeting and I'm only surrounded by white folks. And I'm asked the question, hey Trey, how should we engage the community? At that point, I'm like, uh, I feel a little uncomfortable answering this question in an environment that's only like white folks here. I'd appreciate a little more collective, like-minded perspective here. But I think what I'm trying to get to is that in those circumstances, which happen very often, where you're the only person in the room, what you say can either lead to great success or lead to great failures. And that is different from being a white person in that same room and asking them like, hey, well, what do you think we should do? And they'll be like, I don't know. And then if they say I don't know, you're like, oh, it's normal. They don't know. If I say I don't know, people might, the perception, there might be some perceived like, oh, this guy doesn't know. Is he bad at his job? He doesn't know how to engage in a community
Hmm.
that he lives in or he may have some tie to. So I think there's a lot of high highs and low lows.
Hmm. So when you're in those positions and you say they ask you the question, how should we engage this community? Um, what is your next step? What do you do next when you tell them I got to get more perspective, more like-minded people? What do you do after that to get that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think in those spaces, I think the first step is to call out disparities, like call out that, hey, I'm the only guy you're asking this question to in this meeting full of people who don't share that similar perspective, like in a room full of white folks or whatever. And calling out, because how do I explain this? It doesn't necessarily, the issue doesn't necessarily rest with how you do the work, but it's in the spaces in which the work is defined, and that's a space in which the work is defined. Is a space where I mean I would feel in that circumstance to be like to call out that disparity in the room, this hypothetical example in that room, and then also work to think about, well, how do we you know create a space where engaging this community is informed by the not just me. It's informed by people who various different perspectives about, the community itself. So people who live in the
Or what
community
about
are
the
Black.
community itself? What about
Yeah, yeah,
the
community itself.
community there?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So I don't I'm just trying to understand this. So if you're in those rooms, it's clear that you're the only black person in the room and it's a black community and they're going to ask you how should we do it. First of all,
yeah,
that's interesting. It's good that they ask. The question is what is the motive and intent behind the ask, but it's good that they ask, one. But they wouldn't know. Why would they know? How could they know if they have no interest in this community? And what I mean by that, other than a project that they want to do, um, how would they know? And why wouldn't they be able to ask you because they're saying, "Hey, he's the only black person in the room. We need to ask him. Where else could you go to get a different perspective if the people in the room don't look at the community that they're trying to do this project in?"
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what I'm trying to say is reevaluating. If someone asked that question, I would rather them reevaluate why they felt comfortable asking that question in
Hmm.
this space. It's like, well, why not just when you're putting the project scope together, go talk to neighbors in the neighborhood instead of asking me and then talk to neighbors and then bring that opinion to me, be like, oh, this is what we heard from this many people that we asked, these black folks that we asked. Trey, what other context can you provide on that? It lessens the
Hmm.
load on me, and it's also and it lets me inform my opinion based upon a level of opinion and feedback from folks of color, right? It's not just like a one for one, like, hey, I'm person X and I'm going to ask you X, and what you say is the right thing to do. It's like
Hmm.
that's not how it should work.
Right. Wow, there's so much more I want to ask, and we got a few minutes left. It goes quick. Um, Let me ask this: how do you see the future of the black community in our spaces and owning our spaces and putting in our having our fingerprint, our likeness, who we are, our essence, really carved into a space? Um, how do you see the future of that for black folks and being able to make that happen?
Yeah, I think I'll speak for myself, and I see it as like a struggle to combat complacency and stagnation. Like, if you just live your life, if I live my life without realizing that, people don't live the same lives. Some people don't live the same life as me, and people aren't for the same uh, 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 conveniences I have, and some people don't face the same struggles that I have. I think understanding that you have to continually work to not just feel like everything's okay. And I think for Black folks, like it's understanding that, you know, just because you're let's say in current times, like just because your neighbor down the street's getting arrested and being turned into ice or whatever, right? Doesn't mean that you're not affected, right? Like you have to fight complacency, fight stagnation, fight the othering that society will do. You have to fight that and actively work towards, being more community minded. And I think it's natural that with the world that we live in want you to be more complacent. They want you to not speak up. They want you to just be a hapless, ignorant bystander who just watching the world go by them.
Hmm. So you're saying that really black folks need to really get engaged, stay
Yeah.
engaged, and realize that um, what affects one of us affects all of us. Is
Yeah.
that basically
Yeah.
what you're trying to say? And then stay
100%.
engaged and stay committed and stay vigilant um,
Yeah.
and open
Yeah.
to. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Um, what's your hope? What's your greatest hope for us as black people moving forward? Just as a black man, what is your greatest hope for us as black people moving forward?
I think you know, being a community that opens doors rather than close them. Bringing like myself in my position, like I try to get more folks people of color to bike more, to get into planning, to, read nerdy literature, like because opening the door just makes it a more reflective, inclusive, more black space. And it makes it easier on all of us when we can open the door up for people who look like us. So that's my hope is that people aren't gatekeepers and they don't close the door. They don't think like, oh, I got it and no one else should get it because the only reason
Mm,
I got it is because I got it on my own. Like, no, you got it because people probably lifted you up, and helped you get there. And those people were more than likely black.
wow, wow. Thank you, brother. I got one more last question for you before we hang up. What final message, what final word would you say to black people who are listening to you right now, particularly in this present political climate and what's happening with spaces that where black people occupy?
Yeah, I guess I would say, don't let that little voice in your head that tells you you're okay and you don't have to fight win. You try and fight that voice because that's not reality. That's probably delusion. And you need to be out there and support people who share the similar circumstances of you. Oftentimes that's black folks, but sometimes that can be Hispanic folks, whoever it is, right? Fight
Hmm.
that voice because that voice is call it what you want, call it, the devil, call it whatever it is. It's not a productive voice, especially in our
Hmm.
current state of events.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you for coming on. And the time goes so quick. We have to have you come back, of course. And so I thank you for coming on, man. Thank you for the privilege of your time.
No
And thank
doubt.
you, everyone listening, watching this episode of Yana. You are not alone. Until next time, remember that we're never meant to do life alone. Grace and peace, everyone.
Thanks, James.
YANA is here for you. This is your space to connect, grow, and be heard because none of us are meant to do life alone.